the way I tell people is that I grew up in a 350 square feet low income housing renter apartment with one room and one kitchen. And from there to where I am right now, I think you need a lot of luck and a little bit of hard work. Growing up in 90s, a common dream shared by millions was to be a cricketer. To realize very early on what you are good at, but more importantly, what you can be great at. Some of this, by the way, Yahoo groups are no longer active. So that's how old I feel sometimes. That something that I use is no longer active. Or Orkut, if some of you remember, right? You need to figure out why you are going. What is your goal? Once you go there, what are some of the common challenges you are likely to face? How are you going to overcome that? Have a plan. Have a backup plan, right? Eventually, based on the skills that I have built and the credibility that I have built in the Silicon Valley, obtaining an opportunity to build or run a company. What I am is a guy who likes to plan uh, well ahead of time and plan multiple scenarios that can eventually play out. All you need to do to get ahead in your life is do slightly more than an average person. The toughest part was just to get into the UCLA in this case, or a Harvard, or for that matter, any other school. Everything else is easy, but that plan was now out of the window because there were no jobs. Every leader brings some sort of change in the norm, whatever the norm is, right?
What if I were to tell you that an Amdavadi boy who studied in Gujarati medium schools and grew up in modest environments is today leading global teams of hundreds of people and is living in one of the most premium localities in the US? Is that a story that you might be interested in? Although he's not a household name, but his life story is something that every family wants their children to emulate as they grow up. I'm particularly excited about today's episode because the guest in this episode is someone I love and admire a lot, and who also happens to be a family member, Nisarg Brahmbhatt. Nisarg is from Amdavad, and he has studied in premium institutions like Vidyanagar High School, Nirma University, and then he went on to study in world's premier college, that is University of California, Los Angeles. He's had an inspiring journey of highs and lows, struggles and successes, setbacks and triumphs. And we have talked about a variety of subjects in this episode, like building teams, building skills, and finding joy and connection in books and movies. And he also talked about how he has been strategic about almost everything in his life. So I hope you find some value in this episode. And if you do, please like and share this video with as many people as you can. And also subscribe to Talk of the Town. Welcome to Unboxed. Yes, Nisarg Brahmbhatt, welcome to Unboxed.
Thank you.
So, Unboxed is basically a podcast series about discovering the beauty and power of individual stories and journeys. We try and ask people about their challenges, how they overcome it. And in this process, we sort of learn how they unboxed their true potential and how they achieved success. So I'm particularly excited about today's episode because we both go back a long way. And you have a very interesting and inspiring story. Thank you for doing this with us, and thank you for your time. You have built a career in a foreign country. You have built teams. You have built teams globally. You have been exposed to different cultures, ethnicity and working culture both. So before we jump on to all that, let's talk a little bit about how you began this journey, and what was your childhood like? Like, where did you grow up, and how was that little period of life was?
Sure. First of all, thank you, Parth, for inviting me. It's always nostalgic sometimes to just talk about your own life story because you see your life, in almost like a movie fashion. And as you said, we have talked about this quite a few times. But I'm also very excited about Unboxed. I think it's great that you are, bringing the real life stories of common folks like me who can potentially share real life learning with other people, and they can probably take a few learnings at their own and grow and make this this city of Amdavad and the state of Gujarat even bigger and better than what it is. So you're doing a great job. I want to just commend you for that and thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I think as you said, I have been fortunate to be able to build a career that spans across continents and as well as different cultures. But I think it all started with this place here. I was born in this state, and although my extended family, there are individuals who are successful businessmen and whatnot. We all come from basically humble background. And the way I tell people is that I grew up in a 350 square feet low income housing rental apartment with one room and one kitchen. And from there to where I am right now, I think you need a lot of luck and a little bit of hard work. So I tell this to people that I think the one thing that I think my parents have taught me is to give your best in whatever that you do. And don't be afraid to take on the challenges just because somebody else says that it's not possible to overcome those challenges. And so I think those few things, and I'll probably talk more about it as we do that. But I grew up in this, in Amdavad, went to schools over here. I went to Vidyanagar High School here, Siyusha High School thereafter, Mayur, where I grew up as well in the first 4th grade. And then eventually Nirma, where I did my bachelor's in IT. And then after that, I worked here in InfoCity for about 5 years before I moved out of the country. And all these years, I was a guy who, happened to be chasing a dream of, building teams, building services products that can really make an impact globally, and in the process keep learning. So that's sort of like the overview of my life story here. Once I moved to US, about 14, 15 years back, I first went there with a dream to do my MBA from a reputed university, and then eventually with one single goal, which is, I think, one of the things that I think I share this with a lot of people, that in your life you need to have a very clear goals, and if possible long-term goals, and then make something break down those long-term goals into short-term goals and eventually get there. So my long-term goal as I moved out of the country was to go to Silicon Valley and build or run a company in Silicon Valley. And so I put that goal in front of me and I said, okay, how do I get there? And when I was in Gujarat, I think I was running a very sizable operations, but it was not global. It was still very much confined to the boundaries of Gujarat. So from that bigger goal, I broke it down to saying, okay, I need to get education from certain institutes, I need to work with certain companies, and then eventually I have to pick a startup which gives me both the opportunities to experiment and grow, as well as a platform to eventually scale from there. So I think I've been sort of, like I said, a lot of luck and a little bit of hard work has led me to where I am right now. But I'm just another guy who happened to, have worked hard, chased the dreams to the best of my ability, and I'm still not done yet. It's a long way to go.
Yeah, so we jumped a few years. I want to go back to childhood and explore that area a little bit. Did you always know what you want to become? કેમ કે એક પેલું નાના હોઈએ ત્યારે બધા પૂછતા હોય કે મોટા થઈને શું બનવું છે. તો what was that dream? કે like did you have the typical કે મારે મોટા થઈને એસ્ટ્રોનોટ બનવું છે કે ડોક્ટર બનવું છે કે
Right.
because એ વખતના fascination બહુ અલગ હોય છે. You said that you had a dream. So what were you thinking at that point of time? કે મોટા થઈને શું કરવું છે?
Growing up in 90s, a common dream shared by millions was to be a cricketer. Especially, seeing Sachin rising from a 16-year-old kid to a global superstar. And, I think the introduction of live sports in the country, obviously at one point, just like many, many other kids, I thought, I can also be a cricketer. But I think that dream was always, balanced by pragmatism, and that I think my parents have instilled in me, which was, this is the time where there was no IPL, by the way, right? Here, some kid can, play well for a couple of years in IPL and make enough money to retire, after that.
For good.
That's not the case in 90s, right? So, apart from that dream of potentially playing, cricket professionally, which I think, many, many people had shared and still continue to share, I think very early on, one thing I remember my dad telling me that be a manager. That inspired me to eventually think about, hey, I want to be a leader. So my goal very early on in my life was, I want to lead. I want to lead, I want to influence, I want to, build teams. I did not know what. I don't know where. I did not know, how do I start? But I had that dream very early on. And I saw that, like even on the field of cricket, there are people who end up being the captain of the side or being a leadership role. So I was always seen like that. I remember standing up for class representative, elections and losing it multiple times, but still trying, right? Because I wanted to be a leader, right? So I think that dream early on has always been to be a leader. And then coupled with that, I think I was a little fortunate that, my mom specifically, who has a very, very, she reads a lot basically. So because of that, I also was exposed to, the habit of reading, newspapers, magazines, whatever comes across me. Again, this is 90s, no internet. So all you get is a physical form of book or paper, where I early on realized that, the next century, at least if not century, at least next 25, 30, 40, 50 years, are going to be majorly influenced by computers and eventually the advent of internet. And so people find it surprising when I tell them that when I was in 8th standard, I told my parents that I want to go to an engineering school called, Nirma, and study IT, and then eventually go to US and do a master's there doing this and specific things. And I think, and then eventually, like I said, build a team and whatnot. So early on, I think the dream was, apart from being cricketer, which was everybody's dream, I think being a leader, building teams was always the case. And then because of the exposure to the computer science early on, kind of made me chase that dream of like engineering and then eventually something on that. So I think that's how. So I mean, the change I made. And this is another thing that I think I want to share with young folks. You have to realize very early on what you are good at, but more importantly, what you can be great at. Right? I realized that I was good at cricket. I mean, hey, look, I can't be the next Hardik Pandya or the current Virat Kohli. But yeah, I can probably play a state level competition. But would that be enough for me? Would that uh, give me what I want in my life? And the answer was no. So I had to quickly realize, what can I be great at? What can I be, doing it consistently for a long period of time and make a career out of it, and chase dreams that I want to chase. So
Does
that's,
it happen only with self awareness, or it takes something else also to realize that what you're good and what you're great at?
I think, you need two things. I believe. I think one is self awareness. I think that is something that I want to say that uh, is paramount characteristic that you will see among uh, successful people in their fields. And again, by no means I'm saying I'm the successful people in my field at the paramount level. No, I'm still learning. But you look at Shah Rukh Khan in acting. You look at Virat Kohli in cricket. You look at Messi in football or soccer, as they say. They are self-aware about where they are good at and what they need to change, and they are continuously learning. So that is there. The other thing, I think you need to also surround yourself. And sometimes you are not at the liberty of surrounding, but if you are fortunate to be surrounded by people who keep you humble and make you realize what you are good at, but what you can be great at. That minor difference can go a long way. See, many times as parents, they want to encourage you in everything, even in the things that you are not good at, and you just end up, sometimes wasting a lot of time and energy in that. But if you have friends who can tell you, hey, your parents are going to always say that, but I don't think you are doing as well as you think you are doing. I think those things have helped me. So I think my parents have been very encouraging, and they also have been very pragmatic about telling me. I remember my mom telling me, hey, there are a billion people in India playing, living this country. Only 11 will play in the final 11.
Yeah.
Do you think you can make it there? If the answer is yes, go for it. But if the answer is no, then do you want to waste your time? I think that sort of discussion early on have been very helpful.
So how was your life at Nirma? What was that? What was those years like?
So my life at Nirma was truly, I would say, it provided a foundation for my journey since then. See, I went to a Gujarati medium school throughout my schooling over here. So again, I want you to put yourself into the 90s, where the exposure to the language, English language, the whether it's movies or whether it is cinema, whether it is news or whatever, it just was much less in state of Gujarat. So and again, by no means it means anything inferior or whatnot. It's just that wasn't there.
Yeah.
And so when I actually went, I actually graduated from my 12th science and went to Nirma. One of the biggest shock that I had was that I was one of the few people who cannot speak in English with ease. I was good at it. Hey, look, I got great grades. That's why I was there. But it doesn't mean that you are going to be comfortable speaking and becoming, and sharing your thoughts, articulating your thoughts very clearly. So Nirma gave me the first real life lesson that once you get out of your comfort zone of your neighborhood, your language, your culture, unless you adapt to the new environment very quickly, you are always going to feel like an outsider, and hence you may not be able to put your best foot forward, and may not even be able to maximize your potential. So again, being self-aware, we talked about briefly, and being surrounded by folks who tell you that it's possible, this is what you need to work on. I remember spending the first year at Nirma more in library learning English rather than focusing on the actual subjects of engineering. Because I realized that, hey, look, I got to be really good at, at least articulating my thoughts eventually to, not just within my peers, friends, but also, thereafter. So I think that early first year of Nirma really gave me that, first real life learning of how do I adapt, gave me the confidence also that I was able to actually do that. And then one of the biggest thing I also would say that, I because I had focused on getting into that school, and the folks who were my classmates, which they all had very high level of focus in what they wanted to do in their life. They were very hardworking. They were smart people. So when you surround yourself with smart, able people, ambitious people, it also pushes you to continue to find the best out of you. And that happened with me throughout those 4 years at Nirma. And eventually that also made my long-term goals more clearer and actually bolder as well. So that's another thing I would say, that as I say this to folks, say, hey, why do you want to go to the best school or best XYZ? I think you don't learn more from the professors or your superiors. You learn a lot from your peers. And when you go to when you are surrounded by peers who are bringing the best out of you continuously, that preparation is extremely important. And don't forget the networking, right? I mean, I just want to put a perspective. Some of my batchmates, from Nirma, a name that I think is very common in India is called Pranav Mistry.
Sure.
He was in the same year in computer science when I was in IT in Nirma, right? Yeah. When you have folks like him, as your peers competing in a healthy way, it pushes everybody, right? Some of my friends end up becoming the head of Google Vision, for example, or some of my friends are head of investment banks for the entire region of Europe and whatnot. They all studied in the same class that I studied. So that again was very transformative experience for me.
The people you're friends with right now will become industry leaders later on.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you look at any field, right? Any field, whether it's sports, politics, business, the leaders of tomorrow, you will find a lot of leaders of present. If you look at their past, many of them share past, either in schools or colleges or sometimes jobs, or even some unique way they're connected, because all those people were chasing that one dream, of doing something bigger. So again, that's something I think everybody should try to look for ways to get into those situations where they're surrounded by smart, able, hardworking people, humble people as well. And I was fortunate to be able to do that.
You mentioned earlier that you becoming a leader was part of your goal as a kid also. And I believe you had the leadership role at the age of 21.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What was the size of the team that you were leading?
So I joined, a company here in Infocity that was originally, it's a US based company who was starting their India operations, and they had just hired 4 people. I was probably the employee number 4 probably at that point of time. I don't remember exactly how big. And the goal for that company was to grow very rapidly. So at the age of 21, in the very first few months, I had to start building the team. And then I think I want to say in the first year, I was leading a team of 20 people. in whatever their age, 21, 22 was, is right out of college, of Nirma. Some of that was necessity because I was there early on, so I had to do it. Some of that was also, I think that hunger to build a team, lead a team, and then figuring it out how to do that. So, and that gave me the first taste. Look, you have a dream sometimes, and when you start doing it, you realize, no, this is not for you. Yeah. But that didn't happen to me. I think I realized very early on, during that time, or even before when I was in Nirma, I was leading student projects and whatnot, that I really enjoyed. I think, I want to make sure that, people, you don't become a leader for the title. That's not leader. You become a leader because you think you have the ability to positively influence other people's lives,
right,
for good, right, and for that you have to become a servant first, serving their purpose, helping them, unlock their potential, helping them overcome their hesitations, challenges, and becoming very, in the process, remaining humble, right? And I think being young at that point of time and leading the team, I had to remain, humble and hungry. And how do I basically, build and eventually lead a greater team?
In the early years of your career and leadership, what are the biggest learnings that you can recall?
Yeah. So I think I would probably start with like what helped me, and then probably go in learnings. Because I think that what helped me became the learnings that I think I share with a lot of people. So what helped me was having a good mentor, or having somebody who you can see as a mentor, even if they are not mentoring you. So, you don't have to be Arjun and get Dronacharya, you just need to have a Dronacharya that you can observe, right? So I think having that mentor who you can emulate in the actions. So that was one thing that I think helped, right? That also became a learning eventually. Second, I think, as a leader, I mentioned this early on, that a leader is not about having a bigger, better title, right? Leader is about actually leading people, or helping them overcome their obstacles, challenges, and whatnot. So, that mindset, of humility, humbleness, was something that I saw, and I think I have carried since then. And then other thing that I think, again, I talked about the reading habits. So I realized early on that, hey, look, I'm so young, I can't claim that I am just born to be a leader. I mean, even if you have certain, early start, doesn't mean that you are perfect by any means. So I read a lot of books about leadership. One of my early on favorites in terms of author was John Maxwell, who had several books, about leadership, and then I obviously expanded from there. But so that reading into like how do you become a better leader helped. And then lastly, I think I talked early on about being surrounded by smart and able people. You take the same learning, you put in leadership as well, that if you want to be a good leader, you want to build a team where you are surrounded by people who are good in the areas that they are, good at. And so all those things that I ended up kind of, implementing eventually became learning as well. That if somebody asks me, hey, how do I become a good leader? I say, hey, find a mentor. Even if the person doesn't have time for you, can you at least have the access to see how they operate, so that you can learn from them, right? Number two, I think you want to read a lot. Nowadays, it's a lot of video consumption. So watch videos, whatever that works for you, right? A lot of now bite-sized videos on TikToks and Instagram Reels and whatnot, whatever works for you. There's tons of material out there to really understand what it takes to be a good leader.
Watch Unboxed.
Watch Unboxed, yeah. And also, third is you develop a mindset of, humbleness, humility, that you are leader to help others, not to be not to boss around, and right. And then while you're doing all this, remember, a leader is only as good as the team that he or she builds. So have people who are better than you in the areas that you are not good at in your team. So when you build that team, it becomes a well-rounded team that can basically achieve the goals that individually you can't achieve, but collectively you can. And so early on, I think that experiments of with that those 4 or 5 things that I mentioned became my learning also. I didn't know all those things back then. It's the experiments of how do you do that helped me to build a formidable team. And I'm proud to say that a lot of people that I think I recruited in those times and have ended up becoming leaders themselves, leading teams around the world, and positively influencing their team, in their lives. And some of them have continued to work with me, in different roles, different ways. But again, that shows that, if you build a good team, the connections that you build can last across decades. It's very important currently in the time where everybody wants to jump the ship in every 12 months. That, hey, if you build good teams, you work with great people, you would enjoy that for 20 years, not just 20 months.
Wow, interesting. From one great institute, you moved to another great institute. So can you talk about UCLA and a little bit about your early years in US?
I think I want to, if you can allow me, I probably want to just say quickly like how that process happened.
Sure.
I think that there's a lot of learning in there as well, because I see a lot of young people nowadays, thinking of migrating out of country. And when I drive around Amdavad, I see a lot of consultancies claiming to be experts in helping you settle down in a foreign country, comfortably, easily, and then they make it sound very easy to
attract customers,
and then eventually people do that. They pay a lot of money. So I think the first thing I did was, again going back to what I said early on, like, hey, have a goal, right? Have a goal that and then break down that bigger goal into smaller goal. Bigger goal was to build and run a company in Silicon Valley. Smaller goal as part of that was to get education from a top institute, and then you shortlist a few of those institutes, UCLA being one of them on West Coast, and then you yourself figure out how do you get into that institute, and not going to a consultancy, so-called sometimes experts who have never lived out of this country, by the way.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, these people are businessmen. And again, with respect, again, they are doing they do a great job in what they are doing. But at the end of the day, they never lived the life of a student outside.
True.
More often than not, they have not. They are just claiming to know everything and share it with you, and that's not enough, in my opinion. So I think my journey to UCLA started 18 months before I went to UCLA. Right. I said, okay, if I want to go to a top tier business school in United States, I need to have a great GMAT score. I need to have, great life story and eventually goals that I can articulate, in my essays, or sometimes they call it statement of purpose or whatnot. And third, I need to be able to, be mentally prepared for the life once I arrive over there. So my preparation to go to UCLA started 18 months prior to landing there, and every single thing about it was, discovered to a large extent by me through my own research and building, virtual connections. This is in the time where there was no Facebook, or Facebook was just beginning to take shape. So, again, relying on Yahoo groups and whatnot. In some of this, by the way, Yahoo groups are no longer active. So that's how old I feel sometimes. Something that I use is no longer active. Or Orkut, if some of you remember,
Orkut,
right? So I think, so again, being prepared rather than being reliant on experts is something that really helped me once I arrived in UCL. So I think it's very important as people think about building their life outside of the outside of this great country. You need to figure out why you are going. What is your goal? Once you go there, what are some of the common challenges you are likely to face? How are you going to overcome that? Have a plan. Have a backup plan, right? But be prepared to do anything at that point of time. So that's something I think I would want to share with everybody.
Right.
Once I arrived there, I think I went to UCLA in the middle of Great Recession. Of
It was 2008?
Yes.
Yeah.
And as some might say, it's the best time to be in school or the worst time to be in the school. If you ask me why best, because there are no jobs, so at least you study and spend time and when in school learning something. The worst time because there are no jobs. So even if no matter what you study, there are no jobs.
You're not going to get a job.
You're not going to get a job. So the again, just like Nirma, what Nirma taught me early on was how do you adapt to an unfamiliar situation, circumstances. UCLA put it on steroids. That I was in a new country, surrounded by people around the world, in an environment that was unfamiliar to literally everyone, because the Great Recession really changed the rubric of American economy and in many ways global economy.
Yeah.
I had to figure out that all my plans that I had, in my mind, that once I reach there, if I do just X, Y, Z, I'll get my internship, I'll get my job, were no longer applicable. But what I learned in Nirma was, hey, if you focus on solving that challenge in front of you, realize where you need to work on, you can overcome that. So I think the 2 years in UCLA really, made me even more resolute. That, hey, look, if the challenges that you are now facing are greater than what you thought of, the only way to overcome them is having even bigger, resolve to learn new skills, to experiment something differently and overcome that. So I did everything. I did on-campus jobs. I found a way to get work done in India and get paid through this online coding and stuff like that. I saved. I did not go out. I remember not going out to eat for like months in a row, right? And really counting every single penny. And then most importantly, realize that if I want to have a chance of getting a job, the very important thing for that would be to get an invitation for an interview, because I'm talking about those days where there are no interviews. I remember having big companies coming to UCLA for saying, hey, we are so great, and then you go and ask them, hey, do you have a job? And sorry, we don't even know whether we will have a job tomorrow. That's what I remember many people telling me.
Right.
So what I realized was, hey, you got to be top of your class. So if they are going to have 3 interview slots, like literally inviting 3 people for interview out of a class of 360 of some of the most brilliant, diverse group of people at UCLA, how do you get to those top 3 in your field, right? Whether you got to have great networking skills, you have to score great in your grades. Everything has to be nearly perfect. So again, those bigger challenges prepared me eventually to have this belief that if I put my best foot forward, there's nothing that is outside of my reach. That's what happened. Again, lot of luck.
Yeah. So, no, but like what you talked about it, earlier also, which was being good and being great, right? And you just mentioned that UCLA is a difficult university to get in, right?
Yes,
Not
it's the
everybody
number
can
one public university in US.
right? So, was it more difficult to get in, or was it more difficult to come in the top 3 or get to the top 3 in UCLA? Like, how difficult, let's say, like, for example, is starting a business more difficult or scaling the business more difficult?
See, in my opinion, it's difficult to compare. Those are two different things, right? I think, if anything, I would say scaling is more difficult than starting. Anybody can start. Not everybody can scale. So if you talk about business, that's how I would say,
Yeah.
right? But I think in terms of UCLA, I think getting into UCLA was probably more difficult than getting out of it. And because I think once you have a stamp of credibility because you went to UCLA on your resume, it does help you in your career. Like, a lot of doors open because you are a graduate from a UCLA, or for that matter, an IIM or IIT, or Harvard, or whatever the top schools are in the world. But getting into those schools is very difficult because what you don't know at that point of time is who you are competing with. You are competing with thousands of invisible, extremely smart, diligent, able, hardworking people. You don't know who you're competing with. So that is, I believe, is very difficult to do that. And I think you have to, again, I remember, again, in those days of very less content on internet about how do you get into top school. Again, going back to the habit, I actually read some books and then eventually built some virtual connections, and then found ways to learn what works to articulate my life story in those 500 words essays that if somebody reads, they just don't read like some words on a piece of paper, but they can actually feel the emotions of my dream, what I want to do. And they believe that if we give a chance to this individual, he or she, in my case, Nisarg, will probably make this institution better by having him in this college. I think that's why it was more difficult. But after that, I think it becomes easier. But not the same case for business, right? I'm sure you started your own entrepreneurial journey. Starting was somewhat easy, right? Because you start.
Yeah.
But then what? So I think there are two different things.
True. Yeah. So you did MBA from UCLA. That was how many years ago? It was at least 12, 15 years?
12 years.
12 years ago. In this decade, a lot has changed, especially the way people look at MBAs. Right? How do you look at MBAs now? And MBA is not people, but MBA as a course of study.
See, I think I did MBA because at that point of time I thought that for my goal of building or running a company in Silicon Valley, I required a stamp of credibility from a top tier business school. That's why I did an MBA. I did not do MBA because it's a cool degree, right? So I think you pick any degree, whether it is MBA or Masters in XYZ, that degree in itself has no meaning to it, right? I think knowing why you're doing it is extremely important. Then you decide from which school you are going to do it. That's second very important thing. And third, I think, is in what field you are specializing in, right? I see people doing MBA in international marketing, but staying in India. And I scratch my head, like, what is it that you will do with that, right? I mean, again, I can see the possibility of what you can do, but the reality is that our products are still not as widely available in the global market like Chinese products are. And maybe eventually we'll get there. So I think in my case, I chose to do an MBA because I thought that will give me the stamp of credibility. But here's the plan that I had. I said, okay, if I go and do business school, that is step one. Then I'll go and work for a top tier strategy consulting firm, which then adds the credibility of person being able to think and execute strategically. That was step two. And then step three was finding a startup that was small enough so that where I can go in and have an impact and experiment, but in a field where it will scale, so that when it scales, my career takes off. That was the plan. And then the fourth and final step of that plan was to then eventually, based on the skills that I have built and the credibility that I have built in the Silicon Valley, obtaining an opportunity to build or run a company. So that was the first three step of plan, and the very first step of that plan was to do an MBA. So that goal was very clear. And then if I had done MBA from any other lower tier school, it would not have allowed me to progress to the step two of working for a top tier strategy consulting firm, and then getting the credibility of thinking strategically and executing those things as well. So if I had not gotten the stage two, I would not have gotten the chance to do the step three. So going back to your question, currently I see people chasing the degrees without knowing why they are chasing those degrees. That's number one. Number two, sometimes they know why they want MBA, but they go and get that degree from a school that does not have the reputation that can support them. Right? And then even if sometimes have the right reputation, they don't choose the right focus area. Just because everybody else is doing an MBA in marketing or MBA in BD, that doesn't mean that you should do it.
Right. It was a practical decision. And was it like, this will help me since I'm migrating toward foreign country, this certificate or this degree will sort of help me push my CV or my resume into things. So was it a strategic choice if I have a MBA or any degree from these top three colleges, it's gonna make my life easy in US, or at least give me a little push?
Yeah, I think sometimes when I talk about these things, it sounds too preachy and sounds as like I had already planned everything. If you had recently watched the movie that came out last year, King Richard, where he had plans for both of his daughters before they were born, and then he executes against that plan to the T. And look at the success of Serena Williams and Venus Williams, right? I'm no King Richard, I'm no Serena or Venus, but I think what I am is a guy who likes to plan well ahead of time and plan multiple scenarios that can eventually play out. And so in my planning of, hey, I want to build a company, run a company, I realized that like going to a business school that has global reputation will open new doors. Number one. Number two, we talked about, at Nirma being surrounded by smart, able, hardworking people. Same thing will happen in UCLA. You build connections. I have a friend, my classmate from UCLA, who actually has a podcast like this, and he interviews the world leaders.
Right.
Just to be able to call him a friend that I know I can call him and talk to him anytime, that connection you don't get to build if you go to a lower tier business school or any school, right? I have friends I have a friend, again, if you remember, I earlier on mentioned about, running for class representative in school and failing. I did the same thing at UCLA. I ran for, the representative for international students at UCLA, and I lost to a guy whose name was Yord. So I came number 2, right? And nobody remembers number 2, by the way, right? But losing to Yod was not a problem. You know why? Because he built the next Yelp and Zomato of Thailand. He's the CEO and co-founder of one of the most successful startup and actually now bigger company in Thailand. So you don't get to, be in a company of such people unless you go to a great school. So yes, it was part of the plan. It is not about boasting yourself. I think anybody and everybody can think of self. It's surprising to me sometimes that people spend more time planning for their wedding and their birthday parties or their weekend parties rather than their own life.
Careers.
Right?
Yeah.
If you just spend a little bit extra, right? All you need to do to get ahead in your life is do slightly more than an average person. That's it.
That's
you do
all.
that,
you
already have a head start. And I think so I did plan, right? Where I find I think I got success was also luck favoring me. You can plan everything. Luck has to favor you to a certain extent. That's where the humility comes into picture. Not everything that you plan will work out the way you want. But when it does, don't forget your luck played a part in that, right? And sometimes when luck doesn't favor you, you have to accept the reality, alter the plan, work hard, and make up for the luck with your hard work. So these are the things I think has generally helped me in that. So if you ask me, should people do an MBA right now? Well, people should do anything that will help them achieve their goals, but plan them and then execute.
Yeah, so we covered a variety of topics. But one thing that I really want to know from you is how did you deal with the difficult time? Initial years are always difficult. You have moved to a different country. It's an alien land. People are not familiar. It's very obvious to sort of doubt yourself and also sometimes regret the decision of moving to another country. So how was settling and unsettling in those initial years, and what kept you going during that?
I think what kept me going was probably one of the big first thing is just being prepared. You cannot be prepared for everything, but just being prepared to handle some of the common challenges you face when you move to a new country. Going to a new country and expect to be comfortable will only make you weaker in your resolve to find yourself over there. So I think just being prepared was one thing that kept me going. Second, I think many times the challenges that you face, if you take 2 steps back and sort of zoom out, you realize that these are, in bigger scheme of things, temporary. I realized early on that the recession that we are in, although it is going to be one of the most painful in a century, it is still a temporary thing. You are not going to be in this forever, right? It could take 2 years, it could take 5, it could take 10, but not forever. So realizing that the challenges that you face are temporary, and if you just continue to be in the mindset of solving, you can overcome it. So that's second thing that really helped. Third, you mentioned about regret. I think it's important to know that in life, when you make decisions, many people say, I made a right decision or wrong decision. When you make a decision, the decision is not right or wrong. What defines that decision to be right or wrong is the outcome that it leads to. And many people don't realize that you have a lot of control over that outcome if you continue to stay engaged with the decision. So when I made a decision to go to US for higher studies, I made the decision with the best of the information that I had at that point of time. Nobody can forecast a recession like what we saw. There are now pundits who said, "Oh, I told you so," but they couldn't have said it with the margin of accuracy that what happened.
Yeah.
So the decision that I had made was accurate. All I had to do was now wait for the right time and tweak my approach to turn this into a successful one, the right one. So going to the US, I was under the impression that you just go to US, you go to the top school, and in first 3 months you get your internship that leads to a full-time job, and basically your life is set. It sounded very easy. The toughest part was just to get into the UCLA in this case, or a Harvard, or for that matter, any other school. Everything else is easy, but that plan was now out of the window because there were no jobs. So I just had to find one job that would allow me to stay in the country and continue to build my career. So alter the plan, look at the current problems with a longer time horizon, and you will realize those are temporary problems. And then being prepared is what I think kept me going as well. And I don't regret. I think you learn from your decisions. You make mistakes, and again, if you are self-aware, you realize that you are bound to make mistakes when you are when you're on the path of progress, right? And all you can do is learn from it and make adjustments so that you don't repeat those mistakes often again. So that's probably what kept me going. And the last thing I'll tell you, this is something I think I give credit to my parents. What I have achieved in my life, a lot of that is tied to the upbringing that I had. And one thing that my dad had shared growing up is that if you should not give up in whatever endeavor that you are in. And he gave me this analogy of a boxing match. He said the winner in a boxing match is the person who hits the last punch. All you need to do is find the energy for that one last punch. After that, you can be very tired and you can almost go to the hospital. But if you can find the energy to have that one last punch differentiates between the champion and the loser.
Can you give me another example of this? That at some point you just have to make a decision. You can't really wait for the right decision or the right thought to come to you, and then you go ahead. Can you give me another example of this?
I'll give you a few scenarios more than examples. I think if you are an entrepreneur, and if you're looking for building your team, growing your team, you need to hire certain key people, whether it is in sales or marketing or technical or whatever that you need. Many people go into this decision paralysis. They wait for perfect candidate who can do everything that they have envisioned that candidate to be doing, and in the process they sometimes waste weeks, months trying to find the candidate. And I think in those cases, I think you would be better served if you make a decision of hiring somebody who probably has the will to do what you need them to do, and probably 80-90% of the skills that you need them to have. And then you now use the time that you are going to wait on to either train them to do what they are supposed to do, or use that time to really find out whether they actually can do the job that you had in mind or not, rather than just keep on waiting and waiting and waiting. So it's a scenario. Many of us find ourselves, especially if you're an entrepreneur, you find that you need to grow a team, hire somebody, you wait for the perfect candidate. So that's sort of the scenario that I've faced very often while I was building the teams. You don't compromise on principles, right? But you can probably hire somebody who has slightly less skills, as long as their will to do what they're supposed to do is very high. The other thing that you find very common in your life is in your personal life, you have to make a decision certain time about either you are moving to a different country or changing a job. Again, if you look at, let's flip the scenario. You're not an entrepreneur. You are somebody who is looking for a job, right? You already have a job or you don't have a job, but you're looking for a job either way. And I see people keep on interviewing until they find the right job who one pays them really well, also has the right title, and what other thing they're looking for. Uh, and sometimes they just keep on waiting for the right opportunity. You keep on waiting, you're losing your time, because the most important thing to remember, the one commodity that is extremely limited in supply is the time. You can make up for literally everything else but time. So being decisive is going to help you to progress further in your life. So in my case, I've seen some of these things playing out in my day-to-day life as a leader when it comes to hiring. You do that in my personal life. You have to make a decision when it comes to either buying a house for your first home, or buying a car, or whatever that you're looking for. You have to make a decision. But you have to train yourself. This is very important. That when I say you have to make a decision, I'm not saying that you can just go and make a decision without putting enough thought behind it. So you train yourself that when you have to make the decision, you are going to make the best decision possible at that point of time with the best available information to you. You are not making a decision because you are now in hurry, or you just want to make a decision. You are still going to do your due diligence to the best of your ability, but in a time-bound fashion. And when you do that, you are becoming more decisive and basically using the most precious commodity, which is time, to your advantage. So that would be my biggest sort of learning as well as advice to as well.
Do you think you were born a leader, or do you think you developed leadership skills along the way?
I don't think anybody is born leader.
So it is not a bunch of inherent skills or
No,
gifts
I
that you
don't
are
think
born
so.
with.
I don't think so. You pick any field, sports being the most purest form, where the skills are the most paramount for somebody to become a leader or successful, or even in politics or in a business world. You are not going to be a leader because you are son of somebody or daughter of somebody, or you were born in a family who has just produced leaders. Doesn't work like that. I think nobody is a born leader. Yes, people seem to become more comfortable with the idea of being a leader based on the upbringing they have or the challenges that they've faced, but it doesn't mean that they are a born leader. Everybody has their own path to become the leader that they want to be or they can be. So I believe that many people are somewhat gifted in terms of certain skill set. For example, it is a common acceptance that a certain if you have certain height, for example, or if you have certain type of voice, for example, or if you know certain languages, for example, it makes it easy for you to command more respect than an average individual, right? That does not mean that they are going to be the best leader in the field. Whether you pick soccer as a sport, whether you pick politics, you pick business, every leader that you currently admire, including our current Prime Minister, is an example of pure skill set based, growth. They had to develop some of those skills. They had to continuously work on them, refine them, continue to improve them, and adjust to the new realities. So, in my personal opinion, I don't think anybody is a born leader. I think everybody can be a leader. I think everybody is a leader, because the first person that you lead is yourself. If you treat yourself as, the most important team on the planet, how would you lead your life? With integrity, with sincerity, with hard work. And so everybody can be a leader and is a leader. It's just you have to continuously work on it.
So what are those, like, can you tell me 5 attributes or lessons or skills that you have learned and acquired over a period of time and that has made you a better leader?
Yeah, I mean, some I believe I don't know if I can get to 5 because then there are endless.
Yeah, some.
But I think the first thing that you have to do as a leader is communicate. A leader's job is to be able to communicate with everybody in their team, whether it's corporate world, in politics, their party, or if it's sports team, then the team, the athletes. Communicate in a way so that they are able to connect with them on an individual level. And through that communication, inspire, those members on your team to work towards a common goal. And you connect in a way so that you understand them as a human being, not just as a member of your team supposed to do a particular type of activity that will help your team to achieve whatever that you want them to achieve. All those things cannot be possible without the simple act of being able to communicate. So communication is extremely important for a leader. You pick any leader who is successful, you will find that each one of them are excellent communicator, right? In their own way, right? That's number one, in my opinion. Number two, I think, almost all leaders are in some shape or form change agent. Every leader brings some sort of change in the norm, whatever the norm is, right? You think of MS Dhoni, right? The wicket keeper batsmen prior to MS Dhoni were supposed to be of certain type.
Yeah.
Shorter, focus more on wicket keeping, less on batting, less
Or
attacking,
leading a team.
or leading a team, right? Except probably Syed Kirmani many years back, but they never became as successful as MS Dhoni. He changed the norm, right? You can say Virat Kohli for that matter. Fitness, right? In the cricket, you pick in the business world Dhirubhai Ambani, when how he became the leader that inspired Gandhi, being the biggest name when it comes to change. So leaders are supposed to be the change agent. They need to see very clearly, very early on, what needs to change for this team to unlock the potential, to achieve the goal, which is going to make this team or differentiate this team from being just good team to a great team. Right? So that's number two. And then the number three, I believe, I think is you can communicate as well as you can. You can be the change agent as well as you can. Many times leaders fail because they can't remain committed to whatever that they originally either communicated or rooted to change, right? There are many political parties who came to power on the promise of removing the corruption, but they couldn't remain committed to that idea.
To the idea,
right? And that's why the leadership sometimes loses the face in front of public, right? There are enormous examples like this where you will realize that it's because of the lack of commitment on leadership. Think of any dictatorship, around the world. All those dictatorships came on the promise of bringing a change in the lives of common people. Only to realize a few years later that they forgot that commitment to do that, right? And so I think I for the longest time, I have tried to, remember that, my role as a leader is to be able to communicate so that I can connect with people, inspire them, influence them. I see myself as a change agent so that I'm not afraid to make decisions which are going to break the norm, because I need to advance the goal of the team. But at the very core of it, I need to be committed to the idea for which I have, gathered people around me. So I think those are the three most common things I would say that, leaders should look for. And I think, again, none of them are rocket science in my mind. Everybody knows those things. You just have to keep yourself reminded. Now, one last thing I'll add, I think I mentioned this early on also, is that the leader needs to be humble. You cannot lose your humility in the process. You cannot let the success get in your head and think that the people out there that your lead work for you. You work for them. And that's how if you progress, generally will have a long-lasting success.